من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا ويزرع الورد فينا والرياحينا وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا من ذا يفرج كربا.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Yes, it's time for another edition of Friday Night Live. I hope all of you out there are keeping well, inshallah. I hope you are happy. Yes, happiness is a great and a profound bounty of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala make us happy, and may Allah keep us happy. May Allah keep us smiling. May Allah keep us contented. Sometimes we compromise our own happiness by always looking at what we don't have and not appreciating what we have. We don't follow the principle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who says when it comes to the things of this material world, "Unduru ila man huwa asfala minkum, wa la tanduru ila man huwa fawqakum." Look at those who are below you. Don't look at those who are above you. Look at those. If you're paying rent, look at a person who's living in a shack. If you got an old car, look at a person who has to cycle. And if you got a cycle, look at a person who has to walk. Like that, you'll be content with what you have. You're never going to get everything you want. You'll see the guy who tops the Forbes list, he still wants more money. You'll see the executives who get paid those huge sums of money, the CEOs and these big shots, they still want more. They're still more ambitious. The hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam warns us, وَلَن يَمْلَأَ فَاهُ إِلَّا التُّرَابِ. Nothing will satisfy your greed except the dust of your grave, meaning the day you go in your grave, that's when your aspirations and your hopes come to an end. Even old age doesn't stop it. Sometimes the older you get, the greedier you become, the more you want. So yes, to have a desire to want more, to be able to fulfill some of your dreams and aspirations, to be able to contribute towards the upliftment of your deen or to the upliftment of your community, that is indeed noble, but we can't become obsessed. And we can become only focused on that. Take a time back every now and again. Just take time back, sit back and look at your life. And say to yourself, how much isn't there I need to be grateful for? And look at all the positives in your life. List it if you have to. It's a private thing, so you can't be boasting. List it and say, so much I have to be grateful for. There may be things that I want that I don't have. There may be things that others have that I wish I had. But let me look at the positive. And that will keep you happy, inshallah. That's a great secret towards being a happy person. By being contented with what you have, and by appreciating what you have, and by looking at those who have less than you in this material world. And in terms of your spiritual side, always looking at those who have more. Always look at those who have achieved to a higher extent. Always looking at those who are on a higher level. Like that, your focus then will be on akhirat. Whilst you'll be living in this material world, your focus will be on the everlasting life of the year after. And you would always be looking at the bigger picture in that sense. So may Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala keep everyone out there happy, inshallah. Keep them smiling. Appreciate the wife that you have, the husband that you have, the son that you have, the daughter that you have, the neighbor that you have, the brothers and sisters that you have, your parents who are still alive, friends and acquaintances, your community, your colleagues at work. Appreciate the fact that you've got a boss. As bad as he may be, there are people who would die for a job. There are people who are prepared to do anything for a job. Multitudes and thousands of people who don't have jobs. And you have a job, so even though you might not have the best boss, appreciate the fact that you got a job. You got employees who are giving you grief. Appreciate the fact that you got a business. So many people don't have jobs, let alone having businesses. So let's look at the positive, inshallah. Let's look at the good. Let's look at that which will lift our spirits. Because Allah wants us to be in a positive frame of mind so we can contribute and we can achieve and we can excel, inshallah. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us that. Coming up on tonight's program, inshallah, Tafseer first up is as usual. We started the discussion on Habil and Qabil last week, Abel and Cain, and we'll continue that discussion this week, inshallah. Our story for this week, anecdote for this week, is with regards the benefits of honesty, the spiritual benefits of honesty, and how it will benefit you at the time of death. Then our marital tip for this week, don't cramp the space of your spouse. Spouses also need some time. They need their own space. In terms of our sunnah for this week, we'll be talking about eating in the masjid and what is the prophetic teachings in that particular regard. As always, our plea and our supplication to Allah is that He puts effect in our words and that we are able to practice what we preach. And may Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala make the program beneficial for the speakers as well as all of the viewers out there. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen.
من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We continue now with our Tafseer segment. Last week we discussed the verse وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ بَنِي آدَمَ بِالْحَقِّ إِذْ قَرَّبَا قُرْبَانًا until the end of the verse, but we only discussed the first sentence last week. It's a verse of Surah Ma'idah, a verse that immediately follows what we discussed in the ruku prior to that, in the chapter prior to that, about the story of Moses alayhi salatu wasalam, and the Banu Israel, the Israelites. Now just to quickly recap as to what we discussed last week, we looked at the opening sentence where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ بَنَيْ آدَمَ بِالْحَقِّ, that, O you Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, narrate to them the story of the two sons of Adam, peace be upon him, bilhaq, truthfully. So we said that these were not just from the progeny of Adam and being linked to him in the sense that Adam is the father of all of humanity. No, these were the two biological sons of Adam alayhi salam. They were his direct descendants. And we said, look at this word bilhaq, truthfully. And there are other verses in the Quran which have to do with the narration of stories or incidents where the same word bilhaq is used. نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ نَبَأَهُمْ بِالْحَقِّ. With regards to the sleepers of the cave, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that say to them, I'll narrate the story to you truthfully. نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ نَبَأَهُمْ بِالْحَقِّ. That's one example, and there are other examples which we gave last week from the Quran Kareem. And we explained that generally when we narrate stories and we narrate incidents, there is a tendency to exaggerate, to spice it up, to put the masalas, because it makes it more captivating, it makes it more interesting. But the problem is that every narrator spices up and adds and subtracts, and the whole story gets distorted, and the whole story gets totally changed. And I gave an example last week also of one of my teachers in my primary school years, who gave us an example, physical example, by whispering something into the ear of one student and asking for the message to be passed on. And by the time this message came to the last student, what the last student narrated and what the first student narrated, having heard from the teacher directly, there was a big difference between the two. And we also mentioned the point that teachers should sometimes practically demonstrate certain lessons. It stays in the mind for years and decades thereafter. Then we explained the story in a nutshell, that you had Habil and Qabil, the two sons of Adam and Hawa, Eve. How it used to work was that with every pregnancy, a set of twins would be born, one male, one female. The male from the first set would marry the female from the second set. So it was not allowed for the male from the one birth to marry the female of the same birth, yet to marry the female of another birth. And the male of that birth would marry the female of this birth. But Qabil, who was the elder, he had his sister. The sister was born with him in the same birth. She was much more beautiful than the sister of Habil, which was in a subsequent birth. And he didn't want to marry Habil's sister. He wanted to marry his own sister. And he wanted Habil to marry his own sister, because Qabil felt his sister was more beautiful. And Habil tried to explain to him that it's the instruction of Allah that every time you get married from this progeny of Adam alayhi salam, because this was the system now for the procreation of humanity, that you have to marry a sister from another birth. You can't marry a sister from the same birth. But Qabil didn't want to understand. He didn't want to even provide even any rational or reasonable argument. It's just that I want to finish. And I explained last week that this is what happens when your desires take control of you, and you can't effectively manage and control your own desires. And then they escalated the matter to the father, Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, but then to Qabil did not want to listen. And that's where we left the discussion last week. Now we take the discussion further from here. So I mentioned last week that this was a boy that was brought up in the house of Nubuwah, in the house of prophethood. Yet, his desires had taken such control of him that he didn't want to accept, it was instruction of Allah, and he didn't want to even accept the reprimand of his father, who was a Nabi, Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. So what could Adam alayhi salam do? Adam alayhi salam now deferred the matter to Allah. And he said, listen, you offer a sacrifice and let your brother offer a sacrifice. Now, in our times, when we make qurbani, when we offer a sacrifice, we slaughter the animal and we are allowed to consume the animal as well. And we have no indication in terms of its acceptance. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we might be thinking, well, it will be nice to know if it's accepted, but what if it doesn't get accepted? Imagine you have to live with that pain. So anyway, in those days, if you offered a sacrifice, you were not allowed to consume it. You had to leave it in a barren land, and a fire would come and consume your sacrifice, and that would be a sign of acceptance. And if a fire came and no fire came and it didn't consume your sacrifice, then that would be a sign that it was rejected. So this was now to make a sacrifice to see who was on truth and who was on falsehood. Because Habil is saying, I can't let you marry my sister, I have to marry your sister. I can't let you marry your own sister, I have to marry her because that's the instruction of Allah. And Qabil is saying, she's more beautiful, so I want to marry her, and you can go to hell, you can go jump, I don't care. So who's correct now? So what does Qabil do? Qabil is stingy. He's a farmer. He takes a few crops and he says, okay, that's my sacrifice. Habil, he is the Allah conscious one. He's the one who fears Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. So what does he do? What does he do? He says, no, I will slaughter an animal. And then he puts that forth as his sacrifice. And now they wait. And a fire comes from the heavens and it consumes the sacrifice of Habil and it rejects the sacrifice of Qabil. Meaning Habil was correct that he has to marry Qabil's sister and Qabil has to marry his sister. Qabil can't marry his own sister. But you see, again, I want to drive home this particular point. When your desires have taken control of you, then your obstinacy just increases. Firstly, he transgresses the limit of Allah. Then he disobeys his father. Now he's going up and disobeying Allah directly. Now what does he say? No, he's not. This is supposed to shake him up. This is supposed to make him realize that I'm on falsehood here. I'm following my desires. But sometimes, even though when Allah sends us a sign, Allah sends us a reminder, people come try and reason with us and try and explain to us, we become more obstinate, we dig our heels in. Now he sees that his sacrifice has been rejected and his brother's sacrifice has been accepted. So what does he say? لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take your life. But in reality, the scholars write, even though Habil was younger in age, he was stronger in physique. So when his brother told him that I'm going to kill you, now I'm going to settle this matter, I'm going to take you out of the equation so I can do what I want. Because Habil was standing between him and marriage to his own sister. Because Habil was the man eligible to marry his sister. By the way, Habil, they claim his grave is just outside Damascus. I had the opportunity once when I was in Damascus, they take you by bus. It's a short journey and you go and it's a little bit on top of a mountain. It's a long grave. And it's claimed that that's the grave of Habil. Allah knows best. But nonetheless, Habil was physically stronger. But he didn't retaliate and say, well, if you lift your hands on me to try and kill me, you'll see what I do to you. I'm stronger than you. No, he said, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah accepts from those who have taqwa. He didn't say, I'm the one who have taqwa. That's pride. He says, look, whoever has taqwa, that's the one from whom Allah will accept. And Allah accepted the sacrifice of Habil. So he was trying to tell his brother, listen, don't now let your jealousy become so intense that you want to now do another crime. You've already done one crime by refusing to obey the instruction of Allah. Repent from that and become from the muttaqeen and Allah will accept you rather than wanting to kill me. So here the scholars deduce a principle that sometimes even if you have the ability to take revenge or you have the ability to retaliate, you can choose, depending on the circumstances, you can choose at times not to retaliate, to have the moral high ground, to say, look, if he does something, then the wrong is upon him. It's not upon me now to retaliate with along similar lines, that if he tries to kill me, I'll try and kill him. So that's what the ulama of Tafseer have written. So, قَالَ لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ, Qabil said, I will kill you. Habil said, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala accepts from those who have taqwa. So that brings us to the end of the first verse pertaining to this particular story in Surah Ma'idah. Next week, inshallah, we will continue and we will discuss the second verse. May Allah grant us the understanding.
من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We now move on to another segment of the program, and that is our story for the week, anecdote for the week. Last week we spoke about the story of the king who was tyrannical and he fell critically ill, and the doctors told him that no medication could cure him or help him. He required somebody else's organs, and in those days, if the organs of another person would be taken, that person would die. And they went searching in the whole kingdom, and they found this husband and wife, very poor, and they had a young boy, a son. And they managed to convince the parents that they would sell the boy to the king, giving the parents a huge amount of money. And I explained last week that كَادَ الْفَقْرُ أَن يَكُونَ كُفْرًا. Sometimes poverty can lead you to even disbelief. And we must be happy with our financial situation. Some people, Allah has given them wealth merely to protect them from poverty, because poverty would have driven them to doing things that would have been disastrous for them. And others, Allah has put them in a situation of poverty because wealth would have been disastrous for them. They would have become negligent of Allah, they would have become haughty and arrogant and totally lost the plot. So this young boy, what could he do? He was expecting compassion from his parents, they sold him out. Then some people in the kingdom were not happy, they took the matter to the judges. The judges, out of fear for the king, ruled in favor of the king. And when this boy now was about to go through the procedure, which would ultimately take his life, he looked skywards and he smiled. And the king was totally baffled, and he said, "Why are you smiling? You're about to lose your life." And the boy said, "Well, what do you expect me to do? My own parents, from whom I expected compassion, they sold me out. The judges from whom I expected justice, they sold me out. A king and ruler from whom I expected fairness, he wants my organs so that he can continue to live. So I have only my Allah. I have only my Allah. So I look skyward and I look for my Allah, and I'm content with whatever my Allah wants to happen." And this really moved and touched the king, and he decided then to spare the life of the boy, even if it be at the cost of his own life. And because he did the right thing, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala then cured him miraculously. And the lesson I explained last week, and I said, was this, that those people who have reliance on Allah, they see the hope of Allah even in hopeless situations. Many of us, we can become despondent in a situation like that, totally lose hope. But those who have tawakkul and reliance on Allah, they see the hope of Allah even in hopeless, seemingly hopeless situation. Otherwise, no situation can be hopeless, because there's always the hope of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And we also explained that ultimately the oppressor will have to fail, because the assistance of Allah is not with him. The assistance of Allah is with the oppressed. Even though it continues for what seems to us in this world a prolonged period of time. And last week I gave that example of the Pharaoh as well, for how long he continued to enjoy the bounties of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. But there came a time because of his oppression that he fell. And when he fell, the very people he was oppressing, those are the people who inherited his kingdom, and nobody was there to cry over him. Now that's what we discussed last week. Today we have another story that we would like to share with you, hoping that it's not the story only that you will enjoy, but it's also the lesson behind it that will inspire us to become better Muslims and better human beings, and to inspire us to come closer to Allah and to take lesson from the story that is discussed. The story that I would like to discuss with you this week is the story that took place in the time of Shah Abdul Aziz Dehlawi in India. At the time, he mentions that there was a domestic servant who was quite advanced in age and who had become very ill. Now, she was a person who was not religious. She didn't even know the basics of the faith, of the deen. She was not even performing her salah properly and regularly due to her illness and her old age and her weakness. But for some reason, she commanded the respect of her people. And her family were there for her in her final moments. And they even called the scholars. And whilst she was now in her final moments, she was repeating something. She was repeating something. But nobody could decipher what she was repeating. And different scholars came and they tried to hear what she was saying, but nobody could make out what she was saying. And the family really wanted to know what she was saying. So finally Shah Ahlullah came and he managed to decipher, and he said, she is saying, لا تخافي ولا تحزني. لا تخافي ولا تحزني. The words that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala inspired the mother of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam with when she was about to throw her child into the Nile. That don't worry and don't grieve. Don't worry and don't fear and don't grieve. So when she said this, the scholars were a bit taken aback that, why are you saying these words? I mean, what's motivating you to say these words? So she explained that she was seeing angels that were prompting her to say these words. So they asked her, do you know the meaning of these words? And she said, no, not really. But I can see that these angels are trying to console me by telling me to say these words. So therefore, I'm accepting it and I'm saying it to them. And in this condition, she passed away, repeating the words, لا تخافي ولا تحزني, لا تخافي ولا تحزني. And the ulama write that after she passed away, or rather, just before she passed away, the scholars now inquired further and they said, but the angels are coming to console you. You're not a person who really even practiced much on the deen. Yes, you were a Muslim in belief, but you were very weak in terms of your practice. Why is it that you are being privileged? Is there any reason? Do you know about it? So she said, look, the angels came to me and they said to me that you don't have much in terms of actions, but one day you went to the marketplace and you bought butter. And when you melted the butter, there was 1 rupee that came out from the butter. Somebody had put the 1 rupee. Somehow the 1 rupee got into that butter before it became hard. And initially the thought crossed your mind that, hey, if I take this rupee and I pocket it, I take it from me, who's going to know? No one's going to know. And then a second thought came to my mind. No human might know, but Allah is aware. Allah is aware. And this is what you call taqwa. This is what you call consciousness of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So when that thought came to my mind, I started becoming very restless, and I went back to the shop, and I said to the person, listen, you sold me the butter, but I found this 1 rupee in the butter. It's yours. I'm returning it to you. It was an insignificant amount, but it was the honesty of this woman that actually saved her at the end of the day, at the time of death, which is a very delicate and a very sensitive time. So what do we learn from here? Number 1, don't trivialize any good deed. Don't trivialize any good deed of another person, and don't trivialize any good deed of yourself as well. We're not saying become proud and haughty. Don't become complacent because of the good that you have done. But don't think that some of the seemingly smaller things don't count. Many times, many scholars have written that those who pass on and others see them in dreams. I'm not trying to elevate the position of a dream higher than what it has in the Sharia, but there is substance to dreams, especially those seen by the pious people. When they see others who have passed on in a dream and they ask them, how has Allah treated you and what has been the means of your forgiveness? Many a times it's not the major actions that they have accomplished in their life. It was something small, but there was great sincerity in it, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala accepted them as a result of that. So here, it was a very small action in the life of this woman. But that doesn't mean that we must sit back and say, no, I'm an honest person, so even if I don't perform salah or anything, we don't know what is accepted is what not accepted. We can't take that risk. We must follow the commands of Allah. But at the same time, let's not trivialize any action of the next person or even our own. Secondly, don't look down upon a person. Sometimes that person might be doing nothing right and absolutely wrong in terms of what you know and what you can say and what society knows and what society can say. But we don't know in private. Maybe there's one action that Allah loves so much that Allah accepts that person as a result of that action and forgives all the wrong. And we are doing much more good, but there's one wrong that Allah gets so angry over that Allah takes us to task for that wrong. And we then are worse off than that person who had no good, but the one action saved them. So don't judge people. That's also a second point we learn. And the third point, again, we can never become despondent of the mercy of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We hope and we pray that it's some good that we did some time in our life at some place or the other, perhaps sometimes not even realizing that this is going to bring the pleasure of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. But because we did it sincerely, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will make that the means of our salvation, and Allah will make that the means of our success, both in this world as well as in the year after, inshaAllah. Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We now move on to our marital tip for the week. Last week we spoke about the exchange of gifts. We said that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has promised in a hadith that if you exchange gifts, it's going to breed love between you and the person to whom you are giving the gift. And we explained that sometimes we feel, no, we give gifts to people who don't know how much we appreciate them and how much we love them, people we are trying to impress. But that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes even those who know that you love them, and even those who know that you appreciate them, and even those who will continue to love you, even if you don't give the gifts, this is to increase the love. It's to increase the love. And none of us can say we don't want to love our spouses more or we don't want our spouses to love us more. And sometimes we think people don't want to see appreciation. Even if it's your wife of 30 years, she still desires to be appreciated. That's a natural human need, to feel appreciated, to feel wanted, to feel valued, to feel treasured. So it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be extravagant. It might be just one rose every now and then, it might just be a chocolate every now and then, it might just be a special massage or a feet rub, whatever it is. Give these gifts to each other from time to time, and sometimes when the occasion demands it also, the wife really went out of her way, you had a big do and she prepared everything from A to Z and she gave all your friends and family a good time, then buy her something significant and something a little bit more expensive, as per your budget, without having to become extravagant. No need to go and show it all off. Let's see what my husband bought for me. But this, I concluded last week by saying that those whose marriages are going through that rocky patch, try this out. Start giving gifts and exchanging gifts, and see how Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will put the barakah. And even those who are very happily married, mashallah, exchange the gifts so that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala puts even more happiness into your marriage. Now today I want to discuss a very important point, and that is spouses who are clingy, who want to be with their spouse all the time, who don't give their spouse any space. And this is not healthy. Obviously here you've got to find the middle path. You can't be those who are so apart that you're living under one roof almost as if that's a hotel, but your hearts are totally disconnected. You're sitting on one bed, she's sitting with BlackBerry, you're sitting with iPad. You're sitting on one table, your head is in your business, her head is in the shopping mall. So you're totally aloof, totally disconnected from one another, and you give each other a lot of space. So much space that those are the kind of couples, and after a while, they turn around and say, well, we've drifted apart, because you've allowed yourself to drift apart, you haven't kept yourself close to one another. So don't go to that extreme. But then sometimes you get those spouses who just don't allow their spouse to breathe. Sometimes your husband will want to go out with his friends. I know in moderation, I know he mustn't overdo it, I know it's not fishing every weekend or golf every weekend. Understood, we've spoken about this in the past, but now and then let him go out with his friends also a little bit. Now and then allow her to go to her family also a little bit. It's not that she doesn't love you, it's not that she doesn't like your company. No, but sometimes human beings want a little change, and absence makes the heart grow fonder. So if you go 3 days Jamaat, you go out 3 days in the path of Allah, when you come back Sunday night, your wife is looking forward to meeting you. You allow your husband to go out in the path of Allah, then you look forward to it when he comes back. Now and then you allow her the weekend to go to her parents' house. Go chow by your mother, man. Go chow by some friend, or have her eat out alone, And sometimes people see me in a restaurant eating alone. And they say, hey, Manana, wife kicked you out. Don't worry, sometimes you must give the wife space, man. Let her go and do her thing. You do your thing. There's no harm in eating out alone. I mean, I don't know how to fry egg even in the kitchen, I must be very honest. So if my wife is not at home, I have to go out and eat, or go somewhere else and eat. So the thing is, give space to one another. Each one sometimes got their own hobbies, their own preferences. Don't become too possessive. Where you? Every 5 minutes, where you? I want to know what you're doing. I want to be involved in everything that you are doing. If you go there, I want to know. If you go there, I want to know. Obviously, again, we must avoid both the extremes. You get those who don't tell their spouses anything. That creates suspicion, it creates worry. And then you got those spouses who want to know everything. They really cringe and they clingy and they infringe on your personal space. Even though you're married, and that's the most intimate relationship, and you eat it together, and it's a partnership, and you become a unit, and it's no more about you and I, it's about us. All of that is on its place, and this doesn't contradict that. Giving one another some space doesn't contradict that. Rather, it complements it. It brings in that added flavor into the marriage. You see, if your husband goes to work the whole day, then you look forward to him coming in the evening. But if he sits with you the whole day, then after a while, the novelty wears off, and then you actually become irritable. Yeah, he's here all the time, and go out a little bit. Give me some space. So, sometimes afford your spouse that space and create that space also. Sometimes when you see that now, hey, you know what, we're going through that period where we're getting onto one another's nerves. We're starting to irritate one another. It's amazing sometimes in marriage also how you become more irritable with one another more quickly. So then give one another the space, be it for a few hours, be it for a day or two sometimes, be it, maybe for a longer period sometimes. Maybe sometimes your in-law stay at a distance, so you've got to send her for a week, you've got to send her for 10 days, but give them that space, and that absence will make the heart grow closer, grow fonder. And also sometimes people want time where they just want to think on their own, they want to do things a little bit on their own, they don't want to be interacting and engaging all the time, they don't want to be talking all the time, they just want to be a little peace and quiet. So sometimes even if you don't leave, your wife is in the lounge and maybe she's just relaxing with a book, then sometimes you go to the bedroom and you do your own thing for a short while. Maybe she just wants to clear her thoughts, maybe she just wants to dust a few cobwebs from the mind, realign her focus. Don't be too possessive. Don't be that kind of a person who wants attention from the spouse all the time. The spouse must be there all the time, doing everything all the time. It's not healthy for your marriage. May Allah grant us the understanding.
من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live, the final segment now, Sunnah for the week. Last week I said this is the Amal slot. The Amal slot, meaning the slot where we're motivating that you make Amal, immediate Amal, practice upon it immediately. How many people out there, obviously I can't get immediate feedback, but how many people out there practiced on last week's Sunnah? Let's make intention, inshallah. Each one of you out there, that this week's Sunnah, we're going to practice upon it. Okay, this week's Sunnah, it might be that you won't find yourself in such a circumstance all that often. But last week's Sunnah, which I'm just going to recap, immediately we're going to make an intention that I'm going to practice and I'm going to implement the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What did we speak about last week? We spoke about appreciating food, and we discussed the hadith where Aisha radiallahu anha mentions that when the Nabi of Allah walked into the house and he saw a piece of bread lying on the floor, he picked it up, he cleaned it and he consumed it. And he instructed that we must show appreciation for the bounties of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And I explained last week, sometimes we feel, oh, it's an insignificant crust of the bread or an insignificant few grains of rice. If I pick it up, people will think I'm greedy. No. If it was one small, grain of gold, would you pick it up or not? You'll say, this is gold, man. This is very valuable because you value gold. So why don't we value food? It's a greater bounty of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. People are starving. There are millions of people who are in abject poverty. And yet, when we go to restaurants, as I explained last week, we just see food being dumped and being wasted. We won't even say, okay, put this for me in a takeaway. I'll go and give it to some person. If your health regulations or whatever doesn't allow for you to let your staff eat it or for you to give it to somebody else to eat it, let me go and give it to somebody else to eat. We see children messing. Children by nature, sometimes they're not all that mature, they're not all that able, they mess. But from a young age, we must teach them. Pick it up and put it back into their mouths. Make them pick it up. Make them understand from a young age that we need to show appreciation for food. Where you can pick it up and clean it and eat it, pick it up, clean it and consume it and eat it. Remember Hudayfa bin Yaman, radiyallahu an, when the food fell in the court of Kisra, and he was stretching his hand to pick it up, and others said, hey, Kisra will take offense. He'll think you're trying to say that he doesn't have enough food to feed you, that you have to pick up the food that fell. They said, أَأَتْرُكُ سُنَّةَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْحُمَقَاءِ. These people who don't understand nothing, to please them, must we leave the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No ways. So even if the food falls in a restaurant, then pick it up and eat it. Let others say what they want to say. Let them come to whatever conclusion they want to come to. You have a very noble standard that you are following, and that's the standard of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now we move on to the Sunnah for this week. It's a very interesting discussion. It's with regards the Sunnah of eating in a masjid. There's a narration in Ibn Majah where Abdullah bin Harith radiallahu anhu narrates that during the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we used to eat bread and we used to eat meat in the masjid. Then there is another narration in the Shama'il where it is mentioned that the Sahabi says we used to eat roasted meat in the masjid in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So based on this, the ulama say it is permissible to eat in the masjid as long as the masjid is not going to get soiled and dirty. If there's a great likelihood of the masjid getting soiled or dirty, then it will be makruh and reprehensible to eat in the masjid. However, we must understand that the fundamental purpose of the building and establishing of a masjid is not for it to be an eating hall. So we shouldn't just go and eat there without any real reason. Oh, okay, we don't have anywhere to eat, let's go and eat in the masjid. I'm going to sit down one side in the masjid and eat. No. One is obviously you have a mu'takif. And many ulama say that these ahadith, where the Sahaba say we used to eat meat and we used to eat bread in the masjid with Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is in reference to the i'tikaf. So if a person is a mu'takif and sitting for i'tikaf, then that person has permission to eat. If a person is not a mu'takif, some scholars have said it is permissible for you to eat when there is a need. Don't go and eat in the masjid unnecessarily. That is disliked, because that's not the reason for which masajid have been established. And generally when people eat, then there's laughter, there's jokes, then sometimes the place gets masked. Sometimes, the whole atmosphere of the masjid and the whole sacredness of the masjid is then compromised. And many ulama of the opinion, they say that if you are not a mu'takif, you are not sitting for the sunnah i'tikaf in Ramadan, but you maybe need to eat in the masjid. Maybe you're out in the path of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, and now they are serving food in the masjid. Maybe there was a lecture program that took place, and now they are serving food in the masjid. Then you can eat in the masjid, but make the niyyah of nafil i'tikaf. Make the niyyah that I am sitting for i'tikaf, nafil, optional. Every time we enter the masjid, we should make niyyah of nafil i'tikaf. So you make the niyyah of nafil i'tikaf, and then you consume, and then you drink water, whatever the case may be. But remember, if we eat, we must be very careful that we don't compromise the sanctity of the masjid, we don't soil the masjid. It's better not to eat in the masjid unless you are a mu'takif. That's the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So mu'takif, obviously there's no restrictions. The sunnah itikaf of Ramadan, because where else are you going to go to eat? You're not allowed to leave the masjid. If for necessity you need to eat in the masjid, then at least make niyyah of being in nafil itikaf. And remember the principle, as far as possible, try and eat elsewhere, because that's not the purpose for which the masjid was constructed. This is also a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let us keep this in mind. Well, another program comes to an end. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala accept. We are now coming to that period of the year. The last month of the Gregorian calendar has started. Islamically, we're already moving towards the second month, or into the second month of the Islamic calendar. But it's normally that time of the year in South Africa and in most places of the world where people go on leave, schools close, people go on holidays. We'll be discussing that in the coming days, that how to conduct ourselves as Muslims in the holidays. But it's a time of great relief now. The exam stress is over, matriculants are done, others have written their exams, some have got their marks, others are still going to get their marks. Schools have now closed, I suppose, in most parts of the country. Parents also now say, hey, got these children now to deal with for another 5-6 weeks. And they're no more now hassling and burdening the teachers. Now they're going to be hassling and burdening their mothers and their fathers. Utilize the time of your children constructively in the holidays, because nobody really goes away for 5 weeks. Nobody really goes on a full-scale holiday for 5 weeks. But the children are on holiday for 5 weeks, and don't let them just laze around at home, missing their salah, wasting hours at end, sitting in front of the TV and playing these computer games and PlayStations and PSPs and whatever else that's in existence nowadays. Have a timetable. It doesn't have to be rigorous, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be too intense. It doesn't have to be studying or something academic. But let them, time has to be valued even in the holidays. You can't stand in front of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah and say that, it was holiday, so we took it easy. Yes, you can spend a little bit more time sleeping, a little bit more time doing things that are less intensive, less stressful, different from your routine and norm. That's all part of refreshing the mind and refreshing the body. So when you get back to what you have to get back to, then you can have a full go at it, and your batteries are fully recharged. But we cannot just waste time, watching movie after movie, just going to the malls and roaming around, getting up to mischief, when you don't have your children doing things constructive, whether it's helping their father in the business, whether it's getting some odd job, whether it's going out in the path of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, whether it is doing things that they want to do in holidays, like be with friends and play and do some recreational activities, but in moderation, then they're going to waste a lot of time. And when they have too much time on hand, then they're going to get involved in the wrong activities, and that's when all the problems creep in during the holidays. So we'll talk more about this inshallah in the coming programs, but keep this in mind. There must be something constructive that comes out of your holiday. It can't just be that we went and we swam and we ate and we drank and we slept and we drove and we're back home. No. The purpose of life from the perspective of a Muslim, The purpose of life from a perspective of a believer is far, far greater than that. Far more superior than that. That can't be it, man. Even if it's just one day in our life, we can't let it just go to waste. One day is one day that's gone. It's never going to come. So, 3 weeks or 2 weeks that we will be taking leave, or 5 weeks or 6 weeks that the children will be away from holiday, that time also has to be used constructively. It can be used differently. It can be used for more relaxing activities, more recreational activities, but constructively. And we are Muslims all the time, whether you're on the beach in Durban, whether you're on the beach in Hawaii and Mauritius, whether you're in the shopping malls of Dubai or Mumbai, wherever you are still a Muslim, and the commands of Allah still apply. Holiday doesn't mean you go on holiday from the commands of Allah. Holiday doesn't mean now that you get to break the commands of Allah, or you get to relax and be lax when it comes to the commands of Allah. Not at all. So going into holiday mood must not be that we compromise the teachings of our deen in any way, and we compromise the instructions and the prohibitions of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in any way. Please let us keep that in mind. It's a responsibility of parents to make sure that they oversee that their children are utilizing their time constructively and fruitfully during the holidays. Sometimes parents, they're a nuisance. There's a TV remote. Go and sit there and do your thing. Because I'm not used to having you in the home the whole day. You're just making kharas and making noise and getting in my way. Oh, go to your friend. Just go to your friend. Go play with your friend. What they're doing, which friend, what they're doing, what they're getting up to, only Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows. That's poor parenting. كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. Each one of you is a shepherd, and each one of you is responsible for your flock. More so during the holidays, when there's a greater likelihood of things going wrong. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us that understanding. We remind you, we want your feedback. We appreciate you giving us your thoughts on the program. Email smr@itvnetworks.tv, Twitter @Sulaiman Ravit, facebook.com/Sulaiman Ravit, and the website sulaimanravit.com. For those of you who go on holiday now, enjoy your holiday. May it be a blessed one, may it be a fruitful one. And for those who are yet to go on holiday, enjoy the last few days before the holiday, where I know things get very hectic. The last few days before the holiday is perhaps the most stressful few days. Nowadays, preparing for a holiday makes you more stressed out than anything else. But nonetheless, may Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala make it easy. Keep everyone happy. Keep everyone's iman's levels up. And until we meet again next week, inshallah, fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
من ذا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا ويزرع الورد فينا والرياحينا وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا كاحينا وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا